So today's meal is the vegan bean burger patty recipe that has been made into meatballs. And how I did this is I just took some of the patty and mixed in a bunch of minced parsley. And I'm serving this on buckwheat noodles, soba noodles, and as you can see, I put some flowers on there, and I made a sauce with these lovely black tiger striped tomatoes and some red long pointed peppers because it's yum, and basil and oregano and stuff, the usual kind of that sauce. Now, James and I are going to talk about the first disc of the story of medieval England from King Arthur to Tudor Conquest. And
what a story, eh? Or stories.
Wow.
Wow.
So
it's exciting. How can people find medieval history boring?
We've watched Jennifer Paxton before. She's excellent.
She's awesome.
And
came through Harvard and Yale.
She is so worth watching. I'm going to watch everything that she's put out because, wow, does she ever know her stuff, and she knows how to present it.
Spiffy dresser too. She really knows how to present herself. Very, very neat.
She has answered a lot of questions that I have just in this first disc, and so James and I have been talking about it, and I'll probably talk about it again later because I'm very, very interested in this topic, and so I'm going to go through the disc again. And I missed some of it while I was away, but
I missed a lot of it while I was sleeping. No reflection on this series. I just, when I eat, I zoned out. So when I ate breakfast and I zoned out. So.
Since you have already studied this subject.
Yeah, I did at university with a dude called Dave Hay, awesome teacher at the University of Lethbridge.
Yeah. So will you go over what we were talking about inside? And I know what you're going to say about the dragons. So when you get to the dragons, don't tell me because I will tell you. So.
Okay.
Talk about what she was talking about with the Vikings. We're just going to talk about the Vikings. So this was really the last disc, or the last lesson on the first disc. So the Viking invasions, lesson 6, so we're just going to talk about that right now because there's a lot of stuff to talk about when it comes to medieval England. And so this is what...
Well, you mentioned about the Vikings, and then I'll add some stuff in.
No, you talk about it. You know about this stuff.
I know.
I might get the dates wrong and stuff.
Well, the stuff that I know is basically like to start off with is what you're talking about. Okay.
You just go.
Okay, so the Vikings might have been raiding a little bit hither to there, but they really got going in England a date called or they dated 793. Okay, do you want to talk about 793?
Well, the Vikings first, they were...
Now, first of all, I'm amazed Pauline remembered the date. She said 739, and I knew which date it would be, right? Because I've studied this sort of stuff. It's a key for some of the stuff that I work on. And so I just checked it and see. It was 793, but she said 739. That's very impressive because she just heard it the most. Anyway, go for it.
Well, I think it was before then, actually. But... Anyway,
well, I checked it up in the book. Okay.
That's it, okay?
Mm-hmm.
All
793.
Right. Okay, 793. Well, first,
I knew it would be that date. Anyway, go. Because I've studied. I know that date, right? And I know what the Mayans record. So.
Okay, first, when the Vikings came through, it was recorded. Now, keep in mind, the monasteries, that's where the educated folk are living. So in the monasteries, they're recording history. These are learned people. These aren't just peasants and that don't know this from that, whatever. And they're making, you've heard about Mendeleev and all of the things that he was doing. So, these are the top-notch people are at the monasteries.
Gregor Mendel.
Yeah.
That was just a slip.
I slipped.
Yeah, Gregor.
Anyway. So, I'm not good at speaking. I am good at learning. And James is good at speaking, so I shouldn't be doing this.
No, you're doing a good job. You're doing a good job. That was just a
I
slip.
can,
Yeah.
yeah, I can write because then I can go over it. Speaking, you can't. So if you get nervous, it's that's that, and I'm always nervous.
Yeah.
It's just who I am.
Anyway, you're talking about
So-
the dude that worked on genetics.
Peace. Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Stuff
okay.
like that, yeah.
So anyway, but that doesn't matter. That has nothing to do with this. I'm just saying that monasteries, that's where the learned people were. So,
Well, it has a lot to do with it because I was thinking the same thing.
okay.
You know, like Catholics and monasteries and all this sort of stuff have gotten a bad rap from
Yeah.
the Enlightenment, and I say a lot, and I've been saying for quite a while, I'm for Enlightenment, but not the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment went way too far in attacking the Church, in attacking Judaism, and you know, the attack still goes on. I mean, there's in the religious studies at University of Lethbridge, it's kosher to attack only two religions, and that is, well, three. The capitalism, of course, it just goes without saying. And there's one guy who specializes in Judaism. He attacks Judaism. He says that it's not just myth, the stuff in the Old Testament, but the actual prophets themselves were myths. It's stunning. And the other thing he likes doing is attacking creationism, creation science is what one of the things he's writing a book on. And I'm going, yeah, you know, that's good. You know, I don't like capitalism. I don't particularly care for Judaism in, you know, like at least in a fundamentalist kind of form, you know. And most Jews are very enlightened nowadays, stuff like that. And I don't particularly care for Christianity. There's some strains of it that I respect a little bit more than others, and I don't like capitalism. But you know, if you're going to attack those, you open yourself up to, you've got to attack all the others. If you don't attack the others, then you don't attack especially Judaism. It's shameful to attack Judaism. It's such a small minority type of religion. So. At any rate, I'm against the Enlightenment. A lot of the work that I do, like on mythology and stuff like that, and we'll get to that if the camera lasts long enough, is about how we're having to fight this action against the Enlightenment, where they've been going along looking at myths and legends of peoples and just poo-pooing it, discounting it, making fun of it. There's some truth to be found in some of the ancient myths,
and
the
you try to
important
figure
thing
it out.
is
You keep it open
try to
mind.
find commonalities.
And you don't dismiss it. So anyway,
Don't dismiss it out of hand.
so in the Vikings moved in, and they were not moving into England, but what they did is they first came in to plunder the churches, because that's where all the wealth is, right? So they're plundering, and of course, this is also where the learned people they're documenting it. So what they were documenting when the Vikings first came in were dragons flying overhead. And then, after that, a few ships had come in, just, you know, not very many at a time, just a ship here and there. And they'd haul off a bunch of people to sell as slaves, because the Vikings were major slavers. They would not only sell other people's people to people, but they would take their own. They would take neighbors, sell them. So these were major slavers. And so then, rather than just a few ships grabbing a few people, the Vikings consolidated, and there were 50 or 60 big ships coming in at once, hauling a huge amount of people off as slaves. And that's that, right? So, now James wants to talk about the dragons. And
Well,
I know
did you-
what he's going to say. He's going to say comets. Yeah?
Or one comment.
Okay, go ahead.
So I talked about commonalities. Now I don't know who's making this interpretation, but you see, the Mayans recorded a comet in 792, 1 year before this crazy happenstance in 793. Now understand, I'd never heard about the dragons in that story about the Vikings.
This is new to you then.
That is new.
Awesome.
Exactly right.
Thank you,
So-
Jennifer Paxton.
No, but I'd known about that 793. And so one of the things I study is economic downturns and social downturns in the history of humankind or humankind. And there have been times, this is what the dendrochronologists say, at least one does, he's the world's leading dendrochronologist until he retired about 2000. He says that in historical time, the world's trees have essentially, so a dendrochronologist studies tree rings, where the world's trees have stopped growing. They have essentially grown microscopic tree rings for periods of 5 years, 8 years, and 18 years. That's incredible. So that goes back, according to him, to 2350 roughly BC. Something wrong with his dating system, but once you make the requisite, I've yet to been able to do the studies, but what I'm predicting is he's off by 500 years, and it actually starts 1850 BC, and that's based on not mythology or anything like that. That's based on Mesopotamian history. And they record something amazing. It's misstated just a little bit by the Assyriologists to 2000 BC. It's actually 1850 BC. It already redated it to 1850 BC. I ran across this guy's dendrochronological work, and he's saying these things happened 2350 BC, 1650 BC, and 1150 BC. I'm saying those dates are all wrong. But he had a floating chronology and then a fixed chronology, and that was part of the floating chronology. And he's saying there could be some overlap, but of course it's going to be too much. Dude, it's too much for you to swallow, but it's the based on the Mesopotamian history, not mythology. And if you look at it, I had already dated some sort of downturn in Mesopotamia and in Egypt and in India, and it would be 1850, 1150, 650. The important thing is that's not a fixed floating chronology, that's a fixed chronology. And the... Are you going to reset?
No.
And the differences between the disasters or economic downturns are 700 and 500 years. So this dude, Michael Bailey, has got it right in terms of the differences between those, but because it's a floating chronology, he's wrong in absolute dates. At any rate, I suspect if I were able to access his stuff, I'd find out that he'd record a slight downturn in the production of tree rings, somewhere around 792, maybe for a couple of years. It wouldn't be as heavy a disaster as what happened around 1850, 1150, and 650 BC, nor even as heavy as the one that occurred around 535 AD. And that one, historians don't seem to have a problem with, because around the world where they had writing, there were records that indicated it was like sunset all day. You know, the sun barely came out. That was the whole year, like in the summertime. There was no summer. And so plants didn't grow well and stuff like that. And he says, and there's some truth to it, that's what brought on the Dark Ages. I think because of his misdating, he missed one around 265 AD as well. And that one wouldn't be as bad. But I think the Dark Ages were brought on by 265, and then this thing around 535, occurring too close together.
We were talking about another video, another great course actually, that somebody else had done. I can't remember the name of the guy, but he was talking about pagan religions, and he was not a very bright fellow.
Oh yeah.
He was not a good instructor, but he gave me a lot of information.
There was a lot of. It was still a great course, but his interpretations were posers. I love reading stuff like that, or running.
He had a lot of knowledge.
Because,
but he didn't have a lot of creativity to put it all together.
Yeah, he
was really arrogant. So that stopped him from actually learning. But whereas if he presents it to somebody like me, well, I can put 2 and 2 together. So, whereas he cannot. So this instructor, he was talking about Stonehenge. And what really got me is he was talking about Stonehenge, and he was suggesting that it was a line for winter solstice, which was definitely not the case. It was very obvious to me. I mean, the thing is an open ceiling, for one thing. You want to be out in the rain in winter?
Yeah, it would be rainy in England.
Yeah, like you don't want to do that, for one thing.
It's rainy in England, and especially
for another,
in the
main path is the path to get into the thing is arranged for summer solstice, and it's just very obvious. And so then he was talking about the winter solstice thing, and the bones that they found nearby. There was like a little village, and they dug this moat basically around the thing.
I think he used
deep.
the term trenching.
But it was very deep. It was
so as not to influence
but it was
the interpretation.
Okay.
So what would that trench be for around a village?
To protect the village.
Yeah.
And perhaps to keep the livestock in too, right? Like, So anyway.
But what was his explanation?
Well, he was saying that because the people that were from the north, who were herders and this and that, they had come to this village in the winter, that this was a winter solstice thing, and they were all going to celebrate together there, or something like that, right? I'd have to look back at the notes, and anyway, it was all, his interpretation of things was so messed up. So anyway, he was talking about the herders that came and the celebration, and I was thinking, well, you know, if I'm under attack, if I'm a people, and we all have a common sort of Celtic kind of religion, even though the people up north, they're tribal and they're warriors up north, whereas the people in the southeast are civilized and wealthier and all that.
Let's just call them sedentary in agriculture.
Okay. Then, anyway, what I'm trying to say is the people up north, they brought their animals with them, because that's what they have. If you're gonna move, even temporarily, if you're gonna go somewhere, say you're going to a potluck, what are you gonna bring? You're a herder. So anyway, even if they're having a party and together and everybody's equal, they're bringing their livestock with them to use as food, right? Because that's what they have. That's what they produce up there for food. The people down southeast, when she was talking about it, when there was a famine, those guys in the southeast weren't hit, because it was better growing, so that, like, they could grow grapes and stuff. So if there was a famine, it was the people in the north who suffered more. And
this is good analysis about them suffering more.
So if you're a people who I'm just guessing off the top of my head here, I haven't looked at the dates from the other Great Course or anything like that, but I'm just saying, you know, if I'm a Celtic group up north or down south, wherever, and I've noticed, geesh, we're getting, these Viking ships are moving in, and they're just taking everything. They're not only plundering the churches, they're taking all of our people. They're just, we got to unite, because if we don't unite, we all die. We all die. We all get hauled away as slaves, and that's that, you know. So if you're gonna unite, you go to where the place is less likely to be, where you're less likely to die from famine, because you're accustomed to, okay, this is where we survive. If things are bad, it's in the south. So around Stonehenge, that's where we want to be. And so that's my guess on it, is that right when he was talking about the people, and this was a temporary thing, this little village, it was not inhabited for very long. But I was thinking, well, who in the world was coming in and messing with these people? Because if they have a common sort of background, and they're all under attack from one group of people, you unite, and then you're more likely to survive it. But anyway, and plus James is talking about the comet affecting the growth and everything. If that has happened, if that's what has driven the Vikings to come and plunder even more and take even more people to sell as slaves and that, well, that's where you're more likely to live, is in the place that isn't destroyed by famine as much, right?
Yeah, you head
so that's
south.
where you head. So anyway, that's what we were talking about.
So if you're a Viking, let's say in Norway or something like that, there are mountains there, you get a lot of orogenic rainfall. That's rainfall that's squeezed out of clouds by clouds trying to go up over mountains. Denmark, it's a little bit different. Denmark's not that much different from England. But there are, I think England itself, the southeastern part of it, would be drier than Denmark. Denmark's just flat. There's no real mountains off to the west where the weather is coming from. Whereas England's got some, Wales off to the, it's kind of rugged and stuff like that. To call it mountainous would be a little bit British. You've seen the Scottish mountains.
Yeah.
But, so Denmark's pretty rainy. Sweden would be probably a little bit drier and stuff like that, but it's a little bit further north and maybe southern England and stuff like that. So, see, a comet itself doesn't mean anything. But let's say part of it gets close enough to the world that part of it breaks apart a little bit, and some of it hits the world, then you got problems, because you'll end up with, if it's a big enough hunk of stuff, it's coming in, it doesn't have to be that big, it's coming in fast enough, and cause a big impact crater. Then there's all sorts of stuff put up.
I forgot to put the ginger in your kale juice.
It was bad enough, so don't worry. Yeah, believe me, the cancer is fleeing. It's going out through the pores of my body, trying to jump into the plants or something like that. You better watch out.
You can eat my garlic toast too, because I made enough of the other food that
I'm just going to concentrate on eating this garlic toast the last. I'm not even going to eat the stuff you laid out for me. This is great. Great dish.
I hope not.
I didn't get a chance to really say how great this dish is, but it's awesome. It's the best you've ever done with this buckwheat spaghetti. Yeah,
because the spaghetti sauce hides the color of the buckwheat noodles, which are not attractive.
It's pretty disgusting.
Yeah, they look like worms.
This is awesome.
But they don't.
Yeah, I don't know how you did that, but it's
the sauce, red sauce on top
of
it's the
sauce
and
anyway. So this date 793, I already known about it. I kept it tracked, and I already knew that something got these guys stirred up like the Vikings, stirred them up like a hive of hornets. And then when I ran across the account, this is the way it's interpreted, for 792 of some sort of comet, as I recall, in the Mayan, that's in Mexican accounts. Then I'm going, that's interesting. So this is before contact and all this sort of stuff. The Mayans had writing. I know there's one guy who's asking me, why do you study all these weird languages? And it gives me a certain sense of, gives me a little bit of power. I'm going to be looking at that Mayan stuff. Hopefully this summer and the fall I'm going to start studying Mayan hieroglyphs seriously. I've already looked at them a little bit, so I can look at accounts like these. But my suspicion is the world kind of got in a little bit of trouble. There was something that happened with the Tang Dynasty. The Tang Dynasty was amazing in China from 600 to 900 AD.
And then it's all downhill.
They were ahead of the world. Unfortunately, it has been.
Yep.
You see, what happened is Buddhism, I actually believe in and try to practice nuance. So there are a lot of putative left-wingers out there who keep on talking about nuance. But they don't really practice it. And, like I actually look at belief systems and I draw distinctions based on what they believe in and what they practice. And Buddhism I respect more than maybe any other traditional belief system, i.e. religion. And it's a whole lot better, for example, in communism, fascism, Nazism, and capitalism, maybe not as good. And That's not to say I'm enthused about capitalism by any means, but Buddhism for its time was awesome. So for the first 200 years of the Tang Dynasty, it was, and then it was great. They seemed to have been way ahead of the world, Europe, and oh yes, the Middle East, and stuff like that. So it was coeval, the beginning of it, roughly with the rise of Islam. And ahead of South Asia. South Asia, had a amazing start to things. The third place to develop civilization before China. But a variety of different things happened there, and they tended to fall behind a little bit. But actually, they hadn't fallen that far behind. They were doing stuff like algebra, and what I can tell, they developed a sense of -1 minus the minus numbers around that time, so 600. So other things were happening in South Asia, but so I shouldn't really say that they were ahead. But then all of a sudden the empire strikes back. So Confucianism, I'm not going to say I'm sorry, because I'm not sorry. Confucianism is inferior to Buddhism, and they struck back with a vengeance. And sadly, in China, it's been all downhill since then. Of course, it went steeply downhill with the commies and stuff like that. Horrible belief system. It's a religion too, and you only have to look at the consequences. At least in the Soviet Union, they've ameliorated it, maybe not. They've modified it, shall we say, in China somewhat, and they're doing quite a bit better now economically. At least some of them. There's a huge income discrepancy. Anyway, 793. What's recorded as dragons, I suspect it was just a comet or comets or something like that. I'd have to check and see what time of year it was. If it was the springtime, it could have been Halley's Comet, for example. But and Halley's Comet could have got close enough that it split up into parts, and part of it hit the world.
So far, I don't think she did enough on King Arthur.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
See, I'm for enlightenment, but against the Enlightenment, and it's been really easy to attack Celtic people because they're a minority and stuff like that. And all their stuff seems so fantasy.
Yeah,
and
well,
King
they're doing
Arthur's
the same thing to the
big
native tribes. They've done the same thing to the native tribes.
with things like medications and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Absolutely,
it's ridiculous.
Yeah. And so I know a couple of natives who say, I'm not going to say claim, who say that they've had very serious cancer, one very, very serious, and they were not recovering using traditional Western treatment. And they were given the native treatment, and they're both walking around in the peak of health. I'm not going to dismiss that. I'm just not going to. Cancer just does not decide to up and leave you. There's a small number of Blackfoot people around here, and the chances of two spontaneous remissions, as it's called by the enlightened type of people, happening
there's nothing spontaneous about it.
Yeah, it is.
You're doing something.
Well, there might be the occasional thing. I'm suspicious about it ever occurring. Cancer, when it gets its claws in you, I know about it. It does not want to let go. You have to actually. Now, I'm using traditional treatment, and it has worked, but it's only a treatment that they developed around 1995, and they keep on refining it. So I'm not going to say don't take that kind of treatment, but there are other possibilities, right? There are other possibilities. But have we kind of exhausted that?
I don't know. I'm going to continue to watch this. This is a great course.
It's a great course, yeah.
And